The estimated Latino population of Iowa as of July 1st, 2017, is 216,000, making people of Hispanic or Latino origin the state's largest race or ethnic minority. Latinos represent 6.8% of the state's total population, which is a significant change from 2000 to 2017. Every one of these people has a story and a history of struggle, or lucha, that their ancestors endured as they migrated to the United States. Many came before, during, and after the Mexican Revolution to seek peace, safety, and a new life. They came north through Texas from central Mexico, especially from the states of Michoacán, Guanajuato, and Jalisco. Some came directly to Iowa, recruited by agricultural employers and the Santa Fe and Rock Island Railroad companies. They worked as traqueros, who repaired and laid tracks on railroad section gangs.
My father, he was born in Dolores Hidalgo, Guanajuato. And so was my grandma, Ascension. And my father came to the United States and went to school, got him a job working for the railroad, the Fort Dodge Des Moines Southern. Spiking with the maul, that's hard work. You got to hit that spike directly or you ain't getting nowhere.
My father-in-law, Mr. Cortez, I always call him Mr. Cortez. He was one of the nicest person, hard worker man. He come home late, tired, but he still was be around his family and make sure that their kids have what they need. I mean, to Mr. Cortez, you will never know he spoke Spanish first. His English was so good that you would never know. You would think he was an American citizen just like they did, that he didn't came as an immigrant. I remember him just saying how proud he was to be an American citizen. He loved this country because he said this country gave him a chance. I remember that. And he said anything he could do, he would give it back to the country.
Yeah, my mother had to get a job to help out, to feed our family, and whatever job she come across, she took it. That's what she had to do.
When I came, she spoke Spanish to me because I didn't speak English. She was more like a friend than a mother. She was Mexican, I was Mexican, and she always was proud of being a Mexican, and she always proud of her parents. We had good conversations about what it takes to survive in this country.
Jose Ceso Marentes is a local Latinx artist who appreciates his family history and the inspiration for his work and guidance as a father. He is especially inspired by a story shared by his grandmother, Carmela, who tells of Jessie passing to the border one year on the 4th of July for a toll of 25 cents and a go-ahead green light. That quarter became a spiritual sign of resolve and creativity for Cecil.
As an artist, I follow a lot of signs, and so I follow pennies. Anywhere I go, if I find a penny, I like to consider the universe almost like a wishing well, and I throw it back somewhere else. And to hear that my great-great-grandmothers followed a lead, and the 4th of July, apparently, in their timeline, 4th of July, you'd come here for a quarter. And so to hear that they followed signs, and they followed signs, they followed coins to create a dream, that's really inspiring to me, just because I'm throwing these coins to create a dream. And so I'm really grateful to hear that that's where I got my values from. A blessing that I really want to thank my family for is when they came here, they were a family. You know, going from Ascension down to, you know, my grandma and my grandfather, they still try to maintain that family value, that core, togetherness. I'm really blessed to be around family that feels community is the most important thing, community and family tradition. So
I wish now, with all my heart and all my soul, that things can be the way it was. That they could have learned something from these people. If we could have learned something from them, it should be to get along and to live a good life and to be respectable to each other and to work hard like they did. If you work hard, you can make your dreams come true. I came from nothing. Iowa was good to me, and the people that I came to when I first came from Mexico was the best teachers that I could ever have.
In the late 70s and early 80s, Latinos were striving for more recognition, better employment, and for more representation in government positions. At the time, there were only 2 Mexican-American police officers on the Des Moines Police Department. LULAC and other activists in the city began a campaign to hire more Latinos into the police department and to show more representation. Dan Garza, a Des Moines native and active LULAC member, was deeply involved in the struggle, or la lucha, for human rights, employment and labor rights, and voting rights. Joe Henry is the political director and a former president of the Des Moines LULAC organization.
1982, I had just been a year out of college, just graduated from Iowa State. And so in 1982, I was committed to becoming an activist. So during that time, I was involved in a lot of different things: labor, social justice, community action, and our community, Latino community. So I met Dan at the time where LULAC had a council, LULAC Council 306, which is still around. And Dan was a part of that council. So during that time, we were involved in a lot of different things, part of which had to do with the first United Mexican American Community Center that was forming at 828 Scott Street. So Dan was part of that group, and he did step up to the plate to help others who were other people who were major donors at that point. But he also gave his money. He actually had to get out a loan to help contribute to that. And then later on, we were engaged in voter registration. I mean, that was always part and parcel of what Dan, I, and many others in the community, especially with Council 306, were engaged in, is to fight for our community by way of the ballot and to register people to vote in our community, especially young people.
Dan made sure that his kids were voting. He always had the voting registration cards with them, gave them out to people, so they filled them out. He was a mentor for, I know, the young Latinos.
What was interesting, too, is his passion for his community was also similar for his family. He spent a lot of time with his family, with his kids, with his mom, his dad. He took care of his dad up into his 90s. He was one of the main caregivers for his dad. But he always had room for his wife, Carlene.
If there was something going on that week or that month, he had to be there. And I said, okay, you go and do what you have to do. And if there was something going on in the family, he would try and make it later and make an appearance. So he tried to balance both out, and he did a good job. Dan was very involved in LULAC. Whenever someone called him, they'd ask him for something. If they needed him, like when they have all these things going on downtown, they want a LULAC representative, he was there. He was honored, and we were all there to support him. I cannot express how much he loved being involved in LULAC.
Andrea Rivera is another person who has always been actively involved in the struggle. She was a labor leader at John Deere, where she worked with Dan to protect workers' rights and benefits, and she remembers his energy and passion.
I've known him actually for, it would have been close to 45 years before he passed. And we both ended up working at John Deere. One time at John Deere, Dan decided to run for the Women's Committee. And we talked about it, and I said, I think it's a wonderful idea. The Women's Committee wasn't just for women. It was for everyone and the issues that women face on a daily basis, not only in the factory, but in everyday life. And he was the chairman of that for some time. And I was really proud of him for that. Dan would help immigrants that were newly settled in our Des Moines area, that he worked with Joe Henry and some of the other ones to let them know what they could do or can't do and what was acceptable and their rights, really. We as Latinos have a historic story of the immigrant experience. We have said in many ways that, we did not cross the border crossed us. We have not given up on explaining who we are, how we have had to fight, and how we have to move forward. And he encouraged others, which was very important, young and old, to engage in the process. At the end, he became a mentor. He was a minority person in a high-paying job at John Deere. He went through the education and went through the apprenticeship to become a pipe fitter, and he did a very good job of it. But also know he was the only Hispanic in that department as well. And he had to encounter a lot of negativity when he was in that department. And you're either strong and you move on, or you let them eat you alive, so to speak. And Dan wasn't about to do that.
I would like people to remember my husband as that person that you could always count on. He was always there for you if you needed help. He was a wonderful husband. He always said I was the joy of his life. And he was mine. And he was a wonderful dad with a booming voice. And they always remember that. In his gardening, he loved his gardening. We have 5 grandchildren. The love that they had for him, it was just like, I want to help. And they would be out there watering and bringing tomatoes to the back door and bringing cucumbers and peppers to the back door. I think they will always remember their papa as having their hands in the earth and cultivating and growing stuff. And I think, that's where Dan would want their kids to be. Their hands in the earth and their hands involved around the earth and with people.
When we talk about La Lucha, the struggle, the standing up, fighting for your rights, Dan embodied that. He was the embodiment of the compassion of getting back up after getting knocked down, fighting for the rights of our community, never gave up, and he inspired others to do the same. He was always the perfect example of La Lucha.
Dr. Lorenzo Jasso was born in 1953 in Chicago. He moved to Iowa in the 70s, where he attended Drake University and received his doctorate in education. He made the distinction of being one of the first Latino school principals in the Des Moines School District. He served as the principal of McKinley and Brooks Elementary Schools, located in diverse neighborhoods, with many Spanish-speaking families.
So maybe it was fate, but Lorenzo ended up at McKinley Elementary School, and it was a perfect fit. That's where he belonged. The students there were part of a large community of immigrants, students families had lived there for years. It was a natural thing, to the point of being organic. And Lorenzo stepped up.
My mother's birth name was Dolores Rodriguez, and I've always felt that there's a need to reach out to people who are culturally similar to you and be an aid, especially when you have an education and lots of people are having trouble getting education. And that was the connection with Lorenzo. I told Lorenzo at some point when I met him about my mother, who died last year at 96, and if you asked her the worst day in her life, she would say it's the day she started kindergarten, because she spoke no English and the teacher spoke no Spanish. And I didn't want to see that happen to any kids again, and that was right up Lorenzo's alley.
August of 2000, I was a brand new teacher coming to McKinley, and he thought it would be a good idea for me to get a lay of the land and drive around the neighborhood. So he took me to the Southeast 6th Bridge and showed me where the eagles fly, and just showed me all around the neighborhood, and he was just very proud of it.
As part of the police department's program with ONRA, Hispanic Outreach Neighborhood Resource Advocate, I was visiting all the areas with high concentration of Latinos and schools, organizations, churches. I happened to go into McKinley, and the reason I did is because I used to go to McKinley years ago, and that was kind of in my old neighborhood. So I had the pleasure of meeting him and realizing that he was a principal there and he was a good man to work with.
The students were always very comfortable with him. I would notice him talking one-on-one with students, particularly with Latino boys. He was very focused on that demographic and making sure that the boys were on the right track.
He knew, I think the girls usually are a little bit more mature and they kind of stay on task with what they want to do, but the boys sometimes can get a little off the beaten path, and he had such a passion to make sure that they succeeded.
One of the boys who benefited from the guidance of Dr. Jasso and Aaron Holstrom was Marcos Sandoval Suazo, a talented student who won an award for his poetry in a statewide poetry and art competition.
There was a lot of multicultural students. They were very adamant about having ELL support for the kids that didn't know the language well. I spent maybe a couple months of my early childhood years here in that program. Eventually I ventured out, but there was a lot of kids that looked like me. Dr. Jasso was very kind. I mean, he was always greeting everybody with a smile. Very adamant about eye contact whenever he greeted you, but we weren't just looking at him as some scary principal.
After the renovation of McKinley in 2004, he renamed the school mascot the Eagles. He wanted the mascot to be more reflective of the neighborhood and of the many eagles that gathered along the river just north of the school. He also encouraged his teachers to never stop learning and to move on to the next levels of their profession.
I often see people that worked for him or with him or knew him, kind of the Dr. Jasso era, so to speak. And I think a common thread is that he instilled a love of lifelong learning and education in all of us. He definitely encouraged me to get my master's degree. That was not something that I had planned on doing, but he pushed me towards that. He also came to my graduation party, and I thought that was neat that he took the time to do that for me.
Lorenzo shaped the faculty and the students, I think, in a number of ways, but most of it comes to making people understand the value of education in regard to any sort of success. And he did this in numerous ways, both in the school and around the school. He would have people come. He had me come to the school a number of times. I know he had other people coming to the school. He would have, oddly enough, there were some old Italian ladies who had gone to the school when it was Italian. And he brought them in and said, you had similar experiences as immigrant kids. Here are immigrant kids. Talk to them. He was terribly creative in that regard.
He loved to have fun, and he even bought a horse for his beloved granddaughter, Madeline.
So when I was about 7 or 8 years old, he signed me up for horseback riding lessons, and I definitely enjoyed it so much. And eventually he decided to buy me the pony that I was taking lessons on.
When I was a little kid, my parents had me go to school out of the city, and he had this really quirky sense of humor, And he would always tell me that my Polk County tax when I came into town was to throw 3 pennies out of the car window when I left the county and when I came back into Des Moines. And so when I'd be driving home, I'd always think to myself, out of just silliness as a kid, that, oh, I got to get my 3 pennies and throw them out the window.
One of the fondest memories I have is coming to summer school at McKinley Elementary with him. He would enroll me in school, and I'd do all kinds of classes in the summertime. And back then, I didn't really enjoy it, but looking back, it was definitely so much fun to continue learning. When I was going through elementary, middle school, and high school, he was definitely there for me, and wanted to make sure that I was going in the direction that I needed to be going in, and had all the resources I needed, and just really wanted to make sure that I succeeded in the long run.
When I was out of college, he was kind of asking me what the next move is, and just always pushing me to better myself. So in that conversation was, well, why don't you go to law school?
When Jesse started law school, Lorenzo asked me to have lunch with him and to see him and to keep contact, because one of the things that happens when you join a professional school is you quickly discover that the other people have more background, usually more family and cultural background. He thought it'd be good for Jesse to know a lawyer who would be on his side. And so Jesse and I stayed together, and I still kept in contact with Jesse after he graduated from law school for a while.
Outside of the school environment, he was actively involved in the betterment of the community, serving on numerous boards and committees. He was a co-founder of the first Latino PAC in Iowa, Hispanics.
Hispanics was a PAC that tried to influence for the Latino community political consequences and political developments. And Lorenzo and I and Dave Munoz and Rose Vasquez were 10, 12 years running that PAC, and I think did a fairly good job. That was one of the projects, and Lorenzo was the pusher of that PAC. The catalyst for this was actually Rose Vasquez, who I think put us together.
I think a lot of people thought, maybe this isn't really the right way to go. But he said, we've got to try this. We have limited resources, but we have pocketbooks, and maybe we can reach out to some people.
We often talk about example, and I think this is when the person who leads by example, that is to get other people to start doing things and to be an example of what they can do. So I think one of the things Lorenzo often did, and this let me sound, is recruit other people to do things he thought needed to be done.
Now Lorenzo had a knack, a gift really, for networking people. Now his favorite place was the Drake Diner. He would bring people together and we would brainstorm. He knew that it wasn't possible for him to just dictate or demand that projects be started, but he could plant the seed, if you will.
I got involved with her Hispanic Educational Resources through Lorenzo. Lorenzo had been on the board with a few other people that I knew in the community. He asked if I would join the board, and of course it's difficult to say no to him because he's a good man and he's always got good vision. I joined the board, and it was basically like a learning center, a child care center, a combination of many things.
There was a janitor closet in the building that became the Hispanic Educational Resource Center. And Lorenzo escorted me over to this closet and said, "Oh, Rose, you're not going to believe this. A medical exam room for the community." And I thought, well, okay, let's take a look. And sure enough, it had been cleaned out. It had an exam table. It had the trappings of an exam room.
The space eventually grew and became what is now known as the Clinic of Hope, or Clínica de la Esperanza, which continues to serve the Latino community in central Iowa today.
I want to say it was third grade, and Dr. Jasso held a assembly for the ITBS test, what is called now the Iowa assessments for the grade school levels and middle school levels as well. And he was, addressing the entire grade levels in the middle of the gym floor with the microphone, always very direct with his words. But he wanted to kind of break the ice a little bit, and he made a joke about how they were handing out gum along with their test packets. And he was like, "This will keep your minds fresh and your breaths fresher." So it was just something that had the whole entire gymnasium going rowdy, and all the kids were just cracking up, the teachers and the faculty as well.
Dr. Jasso will forever hold a special place in my heart. My son was born in 2003, and several months after he was born, he got very sick, and I was taking a lot of time off and ultimately decided it would be best if I took a leave of absence. And when I asked Dr. Jasso if I could do that, he, without hesitation, said yes, as long as it's doable for you and your family, please, do that, take care of your family, and come back when you're ready. And I will always appreciate him for that.
When I get together with Dave Munoz or Rose Vasquez, we still talk about Lorenzo, still missed. So I think that you have a personal relationship on people is an underappreciated thing. And he certainly has had that. And I think a good deal of what's going on today starts with and is a legacy of Lorenzo, and is a legacy for which everybody, his family, his friends, members of the community, ought to be and should be appreciative, and not simply Latino community. I think we're talking about the Anglo community, because if you don't have everybody included, then you really don't have a community that works for everybody.
It is such an impactful, significant legacy that really branches out in so many different directions that I really don't think I can give it justice, but it is an amazing legacy that I'm very proud to be part of.
Being the first Latino principal in Iowa, he proved that no matter where you come from or what you have, you can do whatever you want and what you put your mind to. So that's what he lived by, and he helped a lot of people live by that as well.
He impacted the community in many ways. First of all, being a Latino principal at a school, it gave a lot of pride to students and parents that you saw somebody of color in a position that was highly respected, a principal of a school. Not only did he serve at a school where I went, long ago, but that I got to know him and I got to do things with him.
It's good to have these really fond memories of Lorenzo. I wish he was here in real life, because I know that he would continue to push us. He would say, look into the future. Sure, this is what's going on today, but look ahead. What can we be doing down the road? And that challenge is his legacy. That's what he wants us to continue to think about. Lorenzo Jasso left us a lot of good things, but most importantly, he left us the idea of planting seeds, and he loved his garden. I remember that now. The man loved his garden. He planted the seeds in the children, he planted the seeds in us, he planted the seeds in the garden. That's what we have to do, continue to plant those seeds.
Dr. Lorenzo Jasso died in 2014. He was inducted into the Iowa Latino Hall of Fame just last year. He is missed by many. He loved being a father and grandfather. Madeline and Sam gave him strength and happiness, and he was a fun grandfather. His loving wife of 35 years, Victoria, loved and supported him as he kept up the struggle, or la lucha, for the rights and welfare of immigrants and for all people. His spirit soars like the eagles he so admired.